So I bet that not everybody in this room knows who the National Trust is. It's an iconic brand in the UK. It is like Phi here. We are an independent conservation charity. We are the largest conservation charity in Europe. And we are funded through memberships, through legacies, through different ways of commercial activity. Since 1895, we're coming up to our 125th anniversary. Since 1895, our founder, one of our three founders, Octavia Hill, said that all she wants for people, all she wants for the nation is four things: places to sit in, places to play in, places to stroll in, and places to spend a day in. Our thing is places. Our thing is places and their connection to people. And so in numbers, we love our numbers at the National Trust. I say we're one of the largest conservation charities in Europe, and it comes down to, we actually own 1.5% of the land in the UK. We have 10% of the coastline of the UK. We have a lot of nature. We have 2,000 farms. But one of the things that we're best known for is these 350 historic houses. So if you've seen the television show Downton Abbey, we have about 350 of these very large homes with 20 bedrooms. And the thing, if you can go to the next slide, our product is membership. Our product, we have now 5.4 million members. In the last year, we've gained another 400,000 members. And the thing that we sell them is visits to these beautiful homes. They come in, they visit, we tell them stories about the people who live there. We tell them stories of what people did in the past. We also have a magazine. We have the largest magazine in the UK. And we get 21 million people visiting our properties every year, and 200,000 people visiting our land. We have 1,800 farmers who farm our land for us, and 260,000 volunteers who really are a big part of our business model, and 10,000 staff.
So it's a pretty good brand and organization.
It's a pretty good brand, and the thing that we have quite a lot of is data. Our 5.4 million members scan their card every time they visit. Those 21 million visit, each one is a data point. And so we are, if you go to the next slide, we are a brand that has actually been driven by data for, I would say, the last 20 years, which is really interesting. Driven by data and driven by really explicit research. We run one of the largest visitor surveys in the UK. We have 200,000 responses every year, and we get a 20% response rate, which is quite high. But the thing is, I came in 3 years ago, and they said, everything we do is to take people on a journey, to grow their support and engagement for our work on a cause, something that is very emotional. We have members who've been with us for 40 years, and they have such a strong and emotional feeling. But what we were doing was measuring things using very functional and rational means. And so one of the things that then I came in and said, you know what my team needs to start doing is thinking about how we can actually start measuring emotion, how people feel about the brand. The second thing that's really important is in the environmental space, one of the big things that we notice is that people claim to do something and care about the environment, but their actual behavior is a lot less. There's a big gap between what people say they will do and what they actually do. And so that's where Christina came in.
Yeah. And then WALNUT decided to give the answers, as you do. No, but what is important is what she said about emotions. And I think in any business that we are in, and all marketeers that are in the meeting room, a brand's main aim should be emotionally connect with people. And this we have seen in the morning, how important it is to understand this emotional connection. What's the nature, how we can trigger. And sometimes our language, when we talk about rational and emotional futures, sometimes you realize that a lot of things that are functional are actually emotional as well. So you need to twist also how we talk about language, and how important it is to segment your messages according to the emotional mood that, for instance, your visitors are in. So with all of this, National Trust knows, and is actually in the DNA, the importance of the emotion is really at the heart of the mission as a brand. And what happened is this magic with using neuroscience is that we give them some of the tools that we were able to untap into these emotions and understanding people and this human connection, and how actually was the way that we prove it. And if this engagement is happening, I want to know when I can engage and when is the best moment. And this morning, and also with the fantastic example of Luca and Francesco, it was advertising, and it's sexy and it's good. I'm afraid I'm not bringing any sexy stuff today, but I think it gives, and I think has been very clever to Tsunabe here, at give more breadth about how we can use neuroscience. And it's not just in advertising, because sometimes when you leave these kind of conferences, it's like, oh, wow, if I don't have an ad, what I'm going to do with neuroscience. Yeah. So for those that think that, you have to stay. So this morning as well, Jennifer was saying, our brains are more designed to think, to feel, than not to think. And this is what it makes humans humans. And this is how I think today Professor Fabiloni explained it amazingly well. So this feeling dimension is much more responsible of our behavior that we might like to think, or for sure economists would like to think. And understanding, and when you try to understand how people articulate this emotional engagement, is, first of all, is something is happening, is that people don't really give a shit about your brand. And I think it's important because this has and this is not what's happening with a charity as the National Trust. And that's the difference where our job here was easier. But when you are talking about coffee, you think that your coffee is the most amazing thing, right? But people, the coffee, I mean, is as Colin was saying this morning, is not in your first preference, right? And there's no part in the brain that this coffee has a space, It's not. It's more at this network of associations that you have with a coffee that actually is a nice category as well to work for. But understanding these inner motivations of people is what we are talking about. And understand these deep areas and what is happening there, that's why the whole thing of this neuromarketing kicks in. Consumer neuroscience, and I think this morning have been a lot of examples showing that it helps you to make this emotional link between brands and people, brands and consumers, brand and customers stronger. And the first thing it's providing is a lot of these human insights and rules of engagement. And this is without falling into this kind of creative neurodeterminism, because creativity is magic. And the only thing that we are trying to do as a consumer neuroscientist is to bring some sort of humanity to it. And when people like specific faces and like specific shapes, it's grounded in how the brain is wired, and we heard this morning. So understanding all of this, it will make our job as a marketeers, for sure, easier to understand, and sometimes you will see how your intuitive or your first intuitive knowledge is the right one. So I think we should trust a lot about our gut feelings. There's a range of techniques that we could be using in consumer neuroscience. We have the top of brain imaging, fMRI, that we saw today examples, and you will see an example from our work. EEG, the encephalograph, biometrics, skin conductancy, eye tracking, heartbeat, facial recognition, and implicit testing. And I didn't see the presentations before, but I think we have covered all of them, which I'm very happy that now you feel familiar, and as you feel familiar, you're going to like more my presentation, which is great. And the thing about, and I think funny enough as well, this list, if someone is asking about the money, probably the first one is the most expensive one, and the last one is the cheapest one. And but I would encourage you not to use one technique or another, is to understand the pros and cons of each of the techniques, and depending on your research question, so as simple as anything Elisa was talking to today, sometimes it's like, why I need this research in first place, what I need to answer, and then try to get the best methodology to respond to this question. And it's a blend of methodologies, as we will be showing today, but it's important that it's not just, please, one fMRI, one EEG, one. No, it's like, which is your research question first? And it seems a pretty basic question, but I think it's important that we really ask ourselves this question. So today, we are going to be showing 3 projects that we thought that there was more of your interest today. We have run a few more, but I think we are going to give you a good range of what we have been doing for the National Trust. And it's a charity, so you have had a little bit of money to do that, but yeah. So it's good, and it gives hopeful to the sector. So 3 different projects and 3 different techniques combinations. All of these projects have been actually using as well qualitative or quantitative surveys. And I want to reinforce, as this morning have been saying, how important it is to still use surveys. But the clever thing is how we design these surveys, as I made my point this morning, and what is the role for them, and why are important, and in which moment of the process we should be using them when you use in combination of the other techniques. So research for learning. I think a fundamental shift has happened in research, and is when research, rather than being a tool to reinforce what we already know or to keep our bonus right, is just research that tries to learn something new. And it's not just a go, no go, it's more to explore things that can give you another business opportunity. In this the business issue that we needed to answer is understand this visitor journey and how actually the different emotional moods of these visits will let us know what kind of message was more appropriate. So we did this in order to create a framework of messaging for informing the marketing strategy. But first, and as the lovely work that Luca and Francesco presented, we wanted to know, in order to make these messages, I think, coherent with the current brand associations, is to measure brand associations with the National Trust. And it was a very standard approach, asking the level of agreement or disagreement with the different, has this appeared? Oh, no, it's there. The different attributes, which is the same that Segafredo were showing before. And we see from protection, and actually what it happens in surveys is that everything at the explicit level seems the same. So it's difficult for marketeers to make a call about what is important. It was saying that protection, it was the mission of the National Trust, is the main meaning, and actually the fact of being a conservation charity, as well, it was a 93%. Okay, so what can I do with that? I think this is the great thing about surveys sometimes. But if we overlay the implicit, so the way that Luca was explaining about the implicit, so a faster reaction, a stronger link in the brain, and to understand the implicit values, gave actually another direction that while the protection was the meaning for the National Trust, I would be worried, and I think you would be with me, that makes me feel I can make the difference or worth donating to, had a really low level of implicit response.
And for us, that was actually quite a concern. Because what we are doing and what we're trying to do moving into the future is not just the National Trust protects buildings for all of you, it is that we all protect these special places together. So this line makes me feel like I can make a difference is our future. We want everyone, we want to be a participatory movement in the UK for everyone to appreciate special places in their lives, whether they are places that are owned by the National Trust or they're their own gardens or neighborhoods in the community where they live. So it makes me feel like a difference was our opportunity.
Exactly. It's a brand that wants to go in this hands-on, and that the doers and these members are someone active, but the brand was seen quite passive. So this was important for the brand. So now coming back to the brief, that it was to understand the journey, this visitor journey, and the type of message. This is going to sound pretty basic, but sometimes basic stuff is important as well for marketing. And what we learned is, what happened before is that the National Trust, as well as a lot of retail as a retailer space, you just throw your messages when people arrive, when people are during the visit, and at the end. Not thinking that actually each of the moments you have a mindset. You need to respect this mindset. So therefore, the messages have to be congruent with your expectations and what you are more keen at accepting as a message. It's pretty basic, but this is what this test told us. The first is people on arrival. The mood is energetic, right? You're arriving with your kids. You just want to keep on going. And imagine that these people recruiting, do you want to be joining the cause of the National Trust? It's like, please, let me arrive. Let me arrive at the door. But this was happening.
What they say, and especially the families, is, where is the toilet? I've been on the road for an hour. My children need to pee. And that is really important, that we need more functional messaging. And that was one of the things that we found out. They are energetic, they are ready to go, but they also have some very physical needs. And we were trying to sell the membership at that point in time, and they didn't care.
Well, it sounds, now you laugh, but it's like, it's like, it's pretty basic, but you do that. I mean, we are marketeers. I have been failing like this dramatically, and it's like, okay, tell me what is the toilet. Give me the map, and just and take my kids, but this is another thing. In the visit, when people are relaxed and enjoying the moment, the message that we thought that the kind of what people wanted to hear at the moment were functional, still functional, to help them to navigate, to make them this journey easier. It's like, imagine that you're in a museum and you don't know where you go, everything seems exits, and it's like, who the hell designed this space, that I cannot even relax to understand where is everything. But if in this discovery, people are giving you little nudges about how to make it better and smoother, all of this helps actually to emotionally connect with this experience. And this is what we learned, and I think it was quite nice insight. At the exit, the first question that Christina and the team were asking is like, where can I drop my message of the cause? Make people join the cause. And we said, okay, we can say that maybe when people are in the mood, when they finished, it could be the moment where you are actually capitalizing the experience and you can provide these messages and the people can be more approachable.
Yeah, and actually that was probably one of the biggest learnings for us through this piece of work, that we had been doing most of our membership recruiting, most of the asking for fundraising donations at the beginning of the visit, when somebody had just arrived and obviously they wanted to do other things. They were hungry, they wanted a cup of tea. What we found most interesting was that, well, at the end of the visit, for the most part, we don't even say goodbye. We just let them walk out a back door and right straight into the car park. We didn't use that time at all, which they had been absolutely beautifully primed through that whole visit to care about what it is that we do, and we didn't use that moment to help gain support for what we do, to gain a little bit, even just a pound in the bucket, to say, did you enjoy yourself? Would you like to help us put the roof on next year? That is the moment where we could also ask for membership. So what that did is that helped us to change our whole visit strategy. It helped us to change how we think about each moment in the visit and actually what we need to do and how we need to emotionally engage, how we use the whole visit as kind of an emotional priming for the rest of the support for the cause. And so we've got 2 different visitor journey framework books and 2 messages. The outdoors one has just launched because through this work we did what we call our pay for entry properties, our buildings, and we also did some work in the outdoors, in nature, to find out what people wanted when they're visiting a coastal path. So that was very successful work for us.
Exactly. And I think this is very important that National Trust is a complex organization, and I think because we are mentioning things that are very important, the different properties that requires different strategies, but today is not the day to get to this complexity. Yeah. But so the next is that when we wanted is explore how the visitors engage and interact with the messages throughout the journey, so in real moment, all right? And what was capturing the attention. So the other one was doing through survey, using implicit and explicit responses, and this was one actually with an eye tracking and let them have the visit. one thing we learned, again, common sense, was that context is key. In this is the same piece of communications that how many times, and you must admit, and you don't need to answer me, that what they do is to adapt this piece of comms about become a member in all different formats. But obviously, the impact in which all of these pieces are set up, it changed completely the engagement and the attention. If you have read the first information when you arrive, you are actually looking, and I think I have now pointer, no? So the reach of this, so 90% of people were looking at, and the dwell time was 16 seconds, which gives the time. But as we go down, so it's declining the effectiveness. When that is more, the risk was a 60% and 2 seconds. I can tell you that in 2 seconds, people don't read. So it's important that not because you have a formatting thing that everything fits all, you are going to maximize your effectiveness. And then we have a video here of a visitor with the glasses. And you can see the attention on how the different elements that are actually quite distracting. And people were looking, I think, for this human interaction that was not really happening. And then all the elements are actually distracting, and they don't have any anchor to look at anything, you know? So it was quite a sign of that something was not working in the way that we will have these creative formats. So we said reduce the clutter with fewer and larger format pieces. Because what we have seen is that these creatives, when you can't read, is actually quite stressful and it's annoying. So when you have a piece of communications that you can read, or these outdoor campaigns that you can't read what is there, it actually has a very negative impact. Because what we said is something is easy, as we will see, is something that we like more, despite we might like to show off that we like complexity. Another example, research for fueling creativity. Today, I think Luca and Francesco, again, did this job already, but how we can fuel creativity, how we can make it better, how we can improve to make those small changes that will have an amazing impact. What we did with that is to use basically what Luca was using, so we're using EEG to understand the motivational valence or the relevance in the measuring the prefrontal cortex, the activation, the galvanic skin response, so measuring the arousal. So it's giving you not the direction of the emotion, but the intensity. And then the attention through the eye tracking that we just saw. In here, what we were testing is direct mail, and to see how the different imagery was going to work, and to answer whether we should go with a more rational messages in the headline or emotional messages. And we learned much more than that. We learned how important was actually the image rather than the message and the congruency. So we couldn't answer, yes, go for rational messages, because this doesn't mean anything. It means how your message is congruent with the image that you're showing, which is insightful in many ways. The first question about this imagery that we were testing is that what makes a good and memorable execution? First of all, it's about simplicity. This is something that we learned. Our brains like the things that are easy and simple because it's what we call the process influency. The process influency is about the easy that something is processed. And you can earn fluency, but many different ways of executional level, at executional level. Then the way to be impactful is again related to the simplicity. People like more the things that are easier. So if you go with very stunning images of nature, they have a very emotional impact, but can detract people for the main message. So as well, how you balance the impact related to the simplicity is more important. And then I want to show you now how this congruency was that key. Here, we have exactly the same visual with two different headlines. The lack of congruency between the message and the meaning had a massive effect in the relevance. The relevancy was EEG, if I explained before. The relevance is 31. Doesn't matter now what this number means, but it's important that it's obviously more, it's positive than 0, which is the other one. I mean, 31 to 0 is not just a small or not significant difference. And the only change is that the headline is not congruent. How you are going to be talking about discovery if you are leaving a place? The brain works this out in a milliseconds. And the creative team that when we debrief, we're saying, I would have never thought about. Because someone is giving the back? Well, the brain looks for these kind of things that is again, in this easy, and they make sense, all the elements. So it checks out that everything makes sense. Here, as we saw as well in the commercial that Professor Fabio was expressing before, is that what happens in neuroscience that we have actually shown how the brands are obviously less important and less salient than we want. So the logo is normally the element that people pay less attention, and this is the bad news for marketeers. But you can have some executional tricks to make your logo more prominent. Obviously, your logo is better that it's placed at the top, because it's a way of presenting something. But these semioticians will say that it's a good position to be presenting, and it gives you a power. But as well, if this position of the logo is on the top corner, but it's not has the right contrast, can happen what it happened here, that is just not seen. So it doesn't matter how you position, but as well the contrast that this logo has. A very nice trick as well is to use this, what we call joint attention. The different elements, and hopefully if it's a human element there, can actually help me to make my elements of attention more prominent. So in this visual, that people were actually looking at this direction was helping to make the logo more visible, actually from a 6% to a 23%. It's always small changes, but if we make them right, it can obviously help too for branding associations. In this kind of rules of engagement, and I think something that I have been saying, and as well this morning has been covered, is the simplicity, as well the authenticity, what we saw in everything. So in a world that brands have to have a place, I think if they don't become authentic, they don't have any role to play. And all that is around, when the brain is wired to detect fakeness. So when you see a fake image, a very Photoshop image that doesn't correspond to your experience, the brain just is detecting for the genuinity of the images. If this doesn't happen, you are going to have a really negative impact. The importance of faces that Jennifer was talking this morning, they are rewarding, and they are also a way that we learned about emotions. Our faces are trying to show emotions, and through them, we are able to generate the engagement. Then this thing about the joint attention that I explained, how you can use to guide the attention towards your commercial. Then it's important what we saw in the imagery, children and animals, and this was a very marketing intuition, they sell, and it's true. So actually we have a baby that barks, would be the top for driving the emotional engagement. And again, this avoiding this too artistic. So avoiding sometimes to have a wonderful image, so impactful, because actually this, again, can detract to be able to read all of the things when you have a limited amount of attention, as Luca was explaining earlier. And the logo position, as I already mentioned. and what happened in the space that we are actually recruiting.
And so one of the things that we have been doing, one of the key things that happens is this space that you see up here is one of our retail environments, and what we do is actually recruit and we welcome visitors in a space that is very, very complex. What we've been doing over the course of the last, I guess it's been about a year, is working out where our membership recruitment spaces should be and what should be happening in those membership recruitment spaces. And in those places where we're testing, our membership sales are up about 15%. And so what we're seeing is actually that when we have a special place, when we call out, when we have a more simplistic engagement and a much more emotional connection through the imagery, through the right words, and through the congruence with what people are saying, what our recruiters are saying, our sales are up. And that's really important for us.
I think congruency is really, and the context is really important, and the brain is looking for this congruency all the time. Research for discovery, and I think this one is top class. Very difficult question from the National Trust, as they always do. It was Octavia, one of the founders, and the mission that has guided this company from 1895, right, has been how important are places that make me feel the way they make me feel. How I can show the emotional connection between places and people. So, because this was going to be given to them, well, you will explain what has given to you, but I think it's how neuroscience can play a role to provide brand content as well. And a real reason to believe for a mission of a company that has a purpose and a reason to exist. I must admit that I'm very romantic with brands and humans, so apologize for that. But today is St. Valentine, so I can be that. And in this project, the only technique that can answer this question was functional magnetic resonance, because if the hypotheses were right, this emotional connection was happening in subcortical areas of the brain. And, but for doing that, and that's why WALNUT we call the Human Understanding Agency, so we said, all right, we will put people under an fMRI and a scanner, but we are going to be talking to them as well. So we did qualitative, we did in-depth interviews with these national trust members and non-members, asking them about these spaces, these special places. We went with them to the spaces. We talked to them around, the qualitative team did it, to talk and to see the words, the language they were using. And after we quantified this, to take this language in a survey that we surveyed at 2,000 people. So it's a pretty robust study, having taken into account behavioral and all this qualitative. And obviously the star of functional magnetic resonance. We use it to really respond to this emotional link between meaningful places and emotion. And there's an area that the first thing that we did is go to the literature. If there was anything around this topophilia that can actually be used for the brand content without using, but there was almost nothing. So what is functional magnetic resonance? And I think today we have been seeing different papers that have used like Pepsi and Coke challenge. But in a nutshell, and in very simple terms, and now if there's any neuroscientist here can kill me, but let's be very simple. So an increased brain activity in the different organs of the brain equals that more oxygen is needed. And it is supplied by the blood. So what this functional magnetic resonance is doing is measuring these changes. All right? So a more poetic definition is what our professor Opitz from University of Surrey, that we did it, is like how you define fMRI. And he did fMRI opens a window into the brain, allowing us to explore automatic and hard to verbalize emotional responses. And he is the one who is, with the machines, and so this is not us talking. And when we did the subtractions in the brain, comparing places that were important, places that were not important, so common places, then we did objects that were special objects or just day-to-day objects. And we use another affective pictures that are used in psychology to see the affective states. Okay, but this is kind of, there's a report that we can share with all of you with the full research details. But the important thing here is that we actually proved that this emotional linked, because the parts of the brain that were activated were the ones that are talking about this emotional processing. This parahippocampal place was just the area of the brain that is specialized in places. But when these places were more important, the activity in this organ was greater. So we made the whole point about that we wanted to prove, and the importance is that we could actually get this emotional connection through just a picture. Because in the fMRI, obviously, you cannot have the experience on going to the place. So it was important, the power for the brain, that showing a place that is important for you can activate all this emotional processing and having a greater response. And Professor Opitz, again, our fMRI study has established that viewing images of meaningful places create a significant emotional response in core emotion processing areas of the brain. And this is also consistent with the physical sensation these places make people feel. So what have you done with that? I mean, because this is like, sometimes happens, is like, how can I make this actionable? and this is a challenge that we left to you and your PR agency.
And what's interesting is this is something that we have always intuitively known. And we've talked quite a bit today about how where research has come from is a place of just proving what we already know. And when you kind of hear what I'm saying about this is like, oh, but we've known this for 125 years, that people have a special bond with places, that places really stimulate something in us. But the thing is, what we want to do is to create a movement in the UK. We want more people to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and to take care of the cause, to take care of their special places in their neighborhoods. So what we used this for, the first thing that we used it for, was press. So we produced a report that helped us to get more press in the UK, to help reach more people, to help them to understand that actually there is something emotional about our special places, our favorite places. And that was really important for us. And these are the...
Sorry, do you want me to play it again?
No, keep going. And so we had a social media campaign behind it, and what we've been doing for the last year is actually our whole brand campaign, our whole advertising campaign has shifted around this, around the hashtag Places Matter, which has actually been trending on Twitter in the last 2 weeks, which has been brilliant. But what this has done for us is helped to create a story that places matter, and it's laid the foundations for what will be our 125th anniversary next year, where we can actually start to connect different people to their places. One of the most important things, though, for us is that I'm not English. I live in a country full of people who don't like to talk about their emotions. English people don't like to talk about their emotions. When we want to connect with people and understand people and their emotions, this type of research is actually the thing that has really opened everything up for us and shown in a very rational, functional way that actually emotions matter. And so probably the biggest story for me internally and my team has been how this has just lit a fire internally within the National Trust, that actually this thing that we feel, these emotions we feel, it's really important. And that's probably the biggest story for me.